Jen, it looks like we don't have anybody else in the waiting room. I will admit people as they come on. And with that, I just want to introduce Jenniffer Blaylock. She's the new PIC Director for this morning, and she's got some great information for us. We are recording this, so if you want to turn off your screens and your mics so the whole world won't see when we post it on our website, feel free to do so. Although Jenniffer may ask for our participation, she may want us to click back on so she can see us. So she will let us know. Thanks everyone for being here.
Well, hello everyone. It's a beautiful Saturday morning here in Laramie. The sun is shining. There's still snow on the ground. It's pretty chilly outside though. So I'm glad everybody's here. I'm dedicating a Saturday morning to learning a little bit more about special education and what we do. Just a little bit about me. I'm a mom, have been a mom for a really, really long time, 21 years now. And I have 3 kiddos. 2 of my kiddos went through special education, and we were blessed to have very, very good special education teachers here in Laramie, as well as a really, really good 504 coordinator. So today we're going to talk a little bit about 504 plans and why you might have a 504 plan instead of a IEP. So let me figure out the computer because I had it down yesterday, but I want to make sure I can share my files. Okay, I hope everybody can see that. Can everybody see that?
No.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, just double checking. So 504s and IEPs, they're similar in nature, but they are different. They fall under two different parts of federal law. So IDEA is what covers IEPs, but 504s are actually part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. They actually protect all children with disabilities, not just a portion of children, but all children with disabilities, adults with disabilities, college students with disabilities, because they do fall under civil rights law. They don't just fall under, for those kids that qualify under IDEA. Every person with a disability qualifies under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So the primary goal of that particular act is to prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability and to provide children equal access to the general curriculum. So in that nature, IDEA and Section 504 are very, very similar to one another. Now, any school that accepts federal grant money, any kind of federal money whatsoever, has to provide Section 504 plans as well. So just because your child qualifies for IDEA doesn't mean that they don't get the benefit of 504, because they also do. They get the benefit of both. They may not have a 504 plan, but they qualify under 504 as well. So IDEA is that specific law that provides the framework for specialized education for kids that have disability. And it provides financial assistance to the state and local educational agencies in order to provide that specialized education to those kids. Section 504 does not provide extra financial assistance to school districts to provide that education to the kids. So they work a little differently, but generally their ideas are the same for both of those particular laws. So all I did was I did a comparison and pulled them out and compared the two and put them together. So if we just look at the evaluations of 504 and IDEA, they both require evaluations. In some cases with a 504, you can get away with not having an evaluation. If you have an evaluation done by your own doctor, you don't need an evaluation done at the school then. So children that have type 1 diabetes qualify for a Section 504 plan. Children that have orthopedic problems, but not necessarily problems that will require modification to their school schedules or to the curriculum, will fall under a 504 plan as well. There is no timeline under Section 504. So under IDEA, they need parental consent, and then they're time bound to that 60 days to complete that evaluation. And under 504, there is no specific time frame for that testing to occur. So sometimes a kid can kind of be out there without any kind of accommodations for a long time before that kid gets any help at school. So it's really the responsibility of the school and the parents to ensure that their kids get the accommodations that they need. Under both laws, though, there is a mediation, a dispute resolution program that you can go through if you disagree with the school or if the school disagrees with you. So there is some dispute resolution under both of the laws, but they are different. IDEA offers more protections than 504, even though there are some protections under the civil rights law as well. FAPE, the free appropriate public education, it's a basic component of IDEA. Whereas under 504, appropriate here means an education that is comparable to those that are provided to non-disabled students. So if a non-disabled student can play basketball, then a disabled student should be able to play basketball as well. So you have to be able to provide all of those specific programs to disabled students as well as to non-disabled students. So if a non-disabled student has access to it, then a disabled student should have equal access to it as well. So it's not, 504 isn't just about academics. It's not just about PE. It's about the entire school experience, the entire educational experience. Section 504 also doesn't require a specialized education program. It can sometimes include some related services, but it typically doesn't, particularly because the school doesn't get any kind of financial assistance to provide speech therapy or physical therapy under a 504. Typically, kids that need that kind of, those kind of related services are going to fall under IDEA. There's also under IDEA very, very specific guidelines for reevaluation. Those kids have to be reevaluated every 3 years. Under Section 504, they suggest a reevaluation every 3 years, but there is no timeline for those reevaluations. Now, if there's going to be a change in placement for a child, particularly for disciplinary reasons, then they do suggest that you do a reevaluation. They do manifestation determination meetings, just much like they do under IDEA, to determine if the behavior and the discipline is appropriate for the child, and if the behavior is due to their disability, a manifestation of the disability or not. So the discipline is similar. It's not exactly similar, but it's very similar. In Section 504, those kids can be suspended from school. Their placement can be changed. Under IDEA, there are very specific guidelines on how those children are to be disciplined and for how long their placement can be changed without an actual change of placement occurring. So fortunately for all kids with disabilities, Section 504 covers everyone, not just those kids that don't qualify for IDEA. So it covers the entire school experience, extracurricular activities, clubs, sports, PE, art, music, every single class that you can think of is covered under Section 504. So if you have a child, much like in this photo, that has Down syndrome and wants to play basketball on her basketball team, you have to figure out a way so that child can play basketball on her basketball team. Now, their law is kind of specific here. They can't modify a competitive basketball team, but they can do an intramural team that would allow that child to play on a basketball team. they can't modify the rules, and that child needs to meet the same physical standards as the other players, but they need to create a way for that child to be able to play basketball on a team if that's what that child would like to do. So 504 protects all children with disabilities, not just those that qualify for IDEA. It also has some building requirements for schools. And so schools prior to 1977 really don't count. They have to make the building accessible. But for example, if the art class is on the second floor of a building and a student wants to take an art class and that student is in a wheelchair, they can provide a chairlift to get that student up to the second floor so that student can take the art class. Or they can move the art class to the first floor so the student can take the art class. So they have to accommodate the student so the student can in fact get to that art class. They can't deny the student that part of their education if they want to take an art class by leaving that art class on the second floor. So they have to ensure that the building is accessible, or at least every class in the building is accessible to every student in the building, including those with disabilities. 504 also protects students with disabilities from discrimination. And I know this has kind of been a hot topic. I spoke with a parent not all that long ago who had a very severely intellectually disabled daughter, and her daughter was being bullied and harassed at school. And this is information that was very beneficial for her. She didn't know that her daughter was protected and that this kind of discrimination was not allowed. So students with disabilities have the right to be free from discrimination based on their disability, whether that discrimination comes from a teacher, from another student, from a principal, it doesn't matter. They have a right to be free from that discrimination. So 504 protects those rights for these students. They have the right to gain the same level or benefit of achievement as a non-disabled student and to be free from discrimination while they're doing it. So regardless of their ability, they have a right to be in school and to gain the same type of achievement and education as other kids that are non-disabled. So pretty much schools are responsible for taking immediate action. As soon as they are made aware that bullying is occurring, that they need to immediately take action and appropriate steps to investigate and determine what exactly occurred between these two kids. If they don't take that immediate action, then you definitely have a right to file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. And once you do that, the Office of Civil Rights can come in. And if the school doesn't do anything about it, they tend to pull federal funding from that particular school or that particular school district. So schools are pretty responsible for promptly and effectively addressing the harassment. They have a requirement to provide FAPE for every student, and harassment prevents students that have disabilities from having access to FAPE. So you want to make sure that every student has access to FAPE, and bullying doesn't permit that. So if a child is missing school because they're being bullied or harassed at school, then you are denying them FAPE. So it is, bottom line, in the best interest of the school to contact the parents if a child has missed school for 2 weeks in a row. To contact the parent and say, okay, what is really going on? Why is your daughter, your son not coming to school? We really need to know what's going on. If they fail to do that and the parents do file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, then there are some pretty costly things that can happen against the school and the school district for not following through on complaints of harassment. It is, the responsibility of the school to ensure that harassment and bullying doesn't happen to children that have disabilities. So it is kind of different. And so IDEA is a very specific law. It's hammered out. It tells you exactly what each school district has to do, what every single LEA does, what every SEA does. And it is very, very specific. This is how you're going to manage FAPE. This is how you're going to manage LRE. This is how you're going to manage goals. 504s don't do that. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act is not that specific. So it does give a lot of freedom to school districts to kind of make that law work for them. So school districts are required to have a system of procedural safeguards, but it doesn't specify exactly what those procedural safeguards need to be. In IDEA, it does. It is specific. These are your 10 procedural safeguards. In Section 504, those procedural safeguards, they say you have procedural safeguards, but they don't outline exactly what those safeguards are. But typical procedural safeguards are notice, written notice, just like a prior written notice in IDEA. Records review, you have a right to go in and review your students' records. A due process hearing, and then review procedures, any kind of state complaint or filing a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights, any kind of those complaints and those review procedures are a procedural safeguard in 504. Every state is a little different, so you have to really look and see what each state has. These ones are all pretty common for the state of Wyoming. There are also some grievance procedures, and the school districts are required to have an established grievance procedure. It should be a written procedure, but not every school district has a written procedure on how they're going to handle grievances about discrimination for their school. It also states that complaints have to be resolved promptly and equitably, but there isn't anything specific that defines what they mean by prompt. For some people, prompt can be tomorrow. For other people, prompt might be next week. So, it kind of depends on the school district and how they define those terms, prompt and equitable. And they're pretty subjective. So because they're subjective terms, every school district is a little different, and you just kind of have to manage each specific school district in the state. So there are some reasons why your child might need a 504 instead of an IEP. We were very lucky. So our middle son has juvenile arthritis, and he also had a speech language disability growing up in elementary school. And speech language is very, very different than an orthopedic joint kind of physical other health impairment disability. And an other health impairment disability doesn't necessarily qualify you for IDEA, but the speech language did qualify him for IDEA. So because it was speech language, we did not want to add goals for the other health impairment for the juvenile arthritis. So our son actually had an IEP as well as a 504. So you will run into occasion where you're going to have a child with both an IEP and a 504. It does not happen very often. Most kids that have an IEP don't need a 504. The IEP covers everything for that child that a 504 would typically cover. But in our case, where our son needed to have more absences excused than the normal child. So in our case, there would be mornings where he would get up in the morning and he couldn't walk. And we would have to literally do a warm bath for an hour, hour and a half, and really rub on his muscles and his joints to make his joints just more pliable and movable for him to be able to walk. That would sometimes take 2 or 3 hours first thing in the morning, and he would miss the morning classes. So attendance was an issue. We didn't want that in his IEP, so we put it in his 504. He needed to have a top locker in junior high as opposed to a bottom locker because he couldn't squat down to get into a bottom locker. So those things didn't necessarily need to be accommodations on his IEP, but they were definitely accommodations on his 504 plan. So sometimes you'll run into a child that does have both, but most of the time that's not going to happen. Most of the time you'll have a child that has an IEP or a 504. And so IDEA requires, it's a two-pronged eligibility requirement. So it requires that your child has a qualifying disability, and there are only 13 of those, and an educational need. Now, educational need is sometimes a little subjective depending on what school district you're in, particularly here in Wyoming. So if you're in a small school district and your school is super small and there are only 6 kids in your school, and the teacher can pay a lot of attention to your child, then you may not have an educational need for a learning disability at the in the 4th grade because there are only 6 kids in the classroom and the teacher gets to pay a lot of attention to your child. Whereas that same child may definitely have an educational need in Casper or in Cheyenne or in Gillette, where the classrooms are a lot bigger, where the class sizes are a lot bigger. So IDEA does have a 2-prong requirement. They have to have a qualifying disability and they need an educational need. For a child with just a disability that does not have an educational need, they will still qualify for a 504 because they will probably still need those accommodations at school. So in our case, Ethan, they helped with his speech, they improved his speech over time, his speech got better. And by the time that he was, 5th grade, his speech was so improved that he didn't need the IEP any longer, but we still had to have the 504. He graduated from high school with the 504, and 504s can follow your kids into college, just like an IEP can follow your kids into college. So a 504 plan followed him into college. He still gets some extended time for writing. If he has an extensive paper that he needs to write, typing for him is still a little hard. The arthritis is now in his hands. So, that sort of thing. But his juvenile arthritis doesn't qualify him for an IEP. It did qualify him for a 504. So he did need those accommodations to access the general curriculum and school activities, and a 504 plan can provide the same accommodations. The big difference is that a 504 plan doesn't provide a specialized curriculum. A 504 plan is simply different. It's not less than an IEP. It's just different. So it's 2 different approaches to assisting a child with a disability to access the general curriculum. So these are some samples. This one is just an IEP. This one here is an actual sample of a 504 plan. This one here, this child's name is Kevin. And it's just a sample. This isn't a real child. He's in 7th grade. IEP or 504 plans are normally reviewed every single year. And you can request a 504 plan to be reviewed more often than that if you need to meet again. Schools typically have a 504 coordinator. That would be different than a special education teacher. In most schools, I know here in Laramie, our 504 coordinators are the kids' counselors at school. They're the ones that coordinate the 504 plans and make sure that the teachers have the information. So here you see the 504 coordinator, the general education teacher. So there's always a general education teacher so that they know what's going on and they can give information about what's happening in class. The parent is typically there. And then if it's something that affects behavior like ADHD, a lot of times by the time kids are in high school that have ADHD, they've managed coping skills and they figured out some coping skills and they don't really need an IEP anymore and can be moved to a 504. So a lot of times that'll happen. And the same thing kind of happens with learning disabilities as well. A lot of times by the time they're in high school, they've figured out some coping skills, learned some skills to manage their disability and can really move to a 504. But there's normally, some explanation on, what is going on in the classroom with his behavior, with just his learning in general, and then a list of accommodations. Just like in an IEP, you'd see a list of accommodations. Here's a list of accommodations that you would see in a 504. All very similar with IEPs, written assignments, write assignments in a planner, have the teachers initial it, provide an extra set of books at home to keep at home, provide students with a quiet area for test taking. I've seen this one as a separate area for test taking and individual work. So if they want to leave the room, you could add, take breaks if necessary as needed as part of an accommodation as well. So that's just a sample plan there. And then this one we're all pretty familiar with. This is just your general IEP program. The big difference here is that there's a huge review over the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance for the kiddos, and that this present levels then builds into your measurable goals for your child, and then that builds into the special education services that that child would receive. So where in a 504, you wouldn't see these services. That doesn't happen very much. You're not going to have a child with a 504 plan that is sent to a resource room to get help with reading, or sent to adaptive PE for adaptive PE or anything like that. So 504 plans typically do not modify the curriculum. They typically do not include related services because there's not a kickback, there's no financial assistance in a 504 plan. Essentially, they both have the same goal: to provide access to the general curriculum for children that have disabilities. 504 plans, there's no set guidelines or rules for 504 plans, but most schools, particularly those schools here in Wyoming, do have written 504 plans, and they do have to have a written policy for 504 plans. So if you look in your child's handbook, you'll probably find a policy for a 504 plan in their handbook. Most don't include services like speech therapy or physical therapy or adaptive PE or anything like that. And they typically do not modify the curriculum. It's not, 504 plans aren't intended to provide a student with a modified curriculum. Once you modify the curriculum, you kind of remove the child's access to the general curriculum, and therefore they no longer qualify for a diploma while they're in high school. So you want to make sure that you stay within that general curriculum, that they're meeting the same standards that all the other kids are meeting, so that they can still qualify for a diploma. So 504 plans typically will not modify the curriculum so that that child will still qualify for a diploma. And parents do have fewer rights and safeguards within a 504 plan, but they do have the same goal in mind. They want to assist children that have disabilities access that general curriculum. So pretty much if you have questions, or if you need more information, or you have a specific case for your child that you want to talk to us about, there's my contact information. Just give me a call, send me an email. I'll be more than happy to talk through your case with you. And we can kind of go through and see what, what's going on with your child and what's going on at your school. And we can see if we can help you and maybe assist you with writing a 504 plan for your child. It's always nice when parents come in with their own plan already written.
And we did have some questions in the chat, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Did you see that there's a question about preschool in 504s? And I wondered if you knew anything off the top of your head about that, or
So 504 plans protect all children with disabilities, not just school age children. So it would also extend to children that are in preschool. However, most children that are disabled in preschool would typically qualify for early intervention services through IDEA. So you wouldn't find a 504 plan for a kiddo in preschool or early intervention. Normally those kids are going to fall under IDEA. So sometimes, you might find one, but I've never seen a 504 for a preschool child. I can do some additional research, but I've never seen one. But we can look. We can definitely look. If you want to leave your, Gloria, if you want to leave your email address in the chat, I can look and I can get back to you and see if I can find any other information on that.
I think it's actually Laureen Hines. She's a SPED director, I believe. She was in under Gloria's name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So she had a question. She said that they're starting to see them 504s for preschoolers, and I didn't know how that would look either. So
that's very interesting. I've never seen a 504 for preschoolers. Normally they fall under IDEA.
So if you want to unmute and add anything, Laureen or Gloria. Okay, maybe they got their question answered.
Lorraine? Oh, no.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just asking, Lorraine, do you want to ask the question? Because we have had, I think it was like 1 or 2 before.
I'd be very interested to see them because I've never seen one for preschool.
Well, we haven't made one, but what I'm saying is we were like in the process, like this child did not, they weren't eligible for services, but there were still concerns, right? And one of them is, and then there's also like behavior as well, right? So being able to support that child in a classroom where behavior is really like off the charts, but they're not eligible in any service, right?
So
for a criteria for eligibility,
So they don't meet the eligibility criteria for IDEA?
No.
then a 504 plan could work. I don't see any reason why you couldn't write it for a preschool child. It should cover a preschool child just like it would a K-12 or a college student. So, I mean, I would have to do a little research on what that should look like. I'm not sure exactly what it should look like, but since there's not specific criteria on what those things look like either, you could probably make it look however you need it to work for your specific CDC or preschool. But there shouldn't be any reason why it won't extend to preschool. I couldn't think of a reason why it wouldn't extend to preschool since it protects all children.
Right. And I guess my biggest concern is just because I'm also like I just tend to advocate for children in general, is that this child is going to need that support service when they transfer over to kindergarten. And it's good for the kindergarten teacher and the staff and the school to be aware that this child, isn't qualifying for disability, but definitely has needs, educational needs.
Yes.
This behavior is actually affecting, the learning, but we didn't find, a disability. So maybe next time there is one, Lorraine and I can give you a call, and say,
sure.
hey, this is what's going on. I'll send you the MDT, and kind of the report, the teacher report and everything. And because I think
I'm guessing you guys did a full evaluation, a comprehensive evaluation, didn't find ADHD or anything like that.
Yep. Well, see, that's the
very
thing.
interesting.
Well, that's the thing as well. It's like we try to encourage the parents to take their children. We can't make that diagnosis, right? So we try to encourage parents to take their children to the doctor and to see if there's any concern. But the follow through isn't the best, like in our area specifically. So I'm always just kind of like, before the children leave and there's a concern, I always feel bad when there is kind of like a concern especially from the teacher. They have them every day and they know exactly what's going on, and then we don't find anything. I always feel like, well, what could we have done to prepare the school, to prepare that child? Maybe they do need counseling or another kind of service in kindergarten. So anyways, I will go ahead and just, give you an email or a ring and just say, hey, this is going on. Can you help?
Just let me know, and I could probably help you at least get started. But I would definitely, as that child's getting older and getting ready to transition to kindergarten, definitely hold that transition meeting with his school, the elementary school where he will be going or she will be going. That was very sexist of me, but wherever that child would be going, and make sure that you hold that transition meeting and make the school aware that there are some problems. And then as they do age, children do age, the psychoeducational evaluations that they typically do in elementary school do show ADHD. And so they can get a diagnosis of ADHD as they age a little bit. I know it's really hard at the age of 3 to diagnose a kid with ADHD. Right. So sometimes by the time they're 5 or 6, though, it's a little easier for a psychologist to make that diagnosis. So I've seen evaluations from elementary school psychologists that have a diagnosis of ADHD, and they can make that much later, but it's really hard to do that diagnosis at the age of 3. So you are right, and it's hard to make parents go to the doctor and get those kind of diagnoses themselves. So that's a difficult situation. That's really, really tough. So if you need any assistance, feel free to give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It was a great training. So thank you.
You're welcome. Janelle, bullying is always managed under 504. There's nothing about bullying in IDEA. So it's not the responsibility of IDEA. It's under Section 504. So if there's any kind of discrimination or bullying or anything like that, it needs to be reported to the Office of Civil Rights as opposed to the WDE. So the Wyoming Department of Education doesn't manage discrimination or bullying. That all goes through the Office of Civil Rights.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Jenniffer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Carol Justice.
Hi,
I
Carol.
just want to say you did the absolute best.
Thank you.
Best presentation on this topic. Now, you have to know who I am to know how to keep patting yourself.
Okay.
Lorene knows me. A lot of people do. My name is Carol Justice.
Uh-huh.
I am learning disabled. I have 4 college degrees.
Oh, wow. I'm very proud of you.
Yes, and I'm okay.
Uh-huh.
I have a master's in a BA, social work, BS in secondary education, social studies comprehensive, master's in educational administration with a minor in special ed, and a Juris Doctorate in law. I've sat on every table, every way you can be as a parent, as an advocate, as a special education director, both early childhood and school district. As, I mean, you name it, I've been there. You have done the best presentation on 504 and IDEA that I have ever seen, even better than anything I've ever done. So you have to be incredibly proud of yourself. This is the most important issue for parents, is to get 504 plans when they are needed. And thank you, Lorraine Hines, because that program was the early intervention for my son, who, yes, was on an IEP, was first on a individual family care plan, then he transitioned to Part B. He was on an IEP till he was 9 at that time Holy Name School in Sheridan, because I also made sure they were giving special education services to children in conjunction with the local school district. Then he transitioned to a 504. I'm happy to say that my son, who turns 26, I guess it's this month, it's February now. No, we're still January.
Yes.
Who turns 26 in February, has 2 associate's degrees from Western Wyoming College and a bachelor's degree from Utah State University in science, and works in research and development. And his 504 plan went all the way to college with him. People, this is so incredibly important. When your child goes off, I'm learning disabled and I'm going to be 70 this year. We didn't have special ed when I was in school. I loved one of the speakers said the other day, there were, oh no, it wasn't here, it was Lander, it was that Dr. Hallowell who said, yeah, back when he went to school, he's in his 70s, there were only 2, you were either smart or stupid. I had the pushy mother special ed. So she was the one who always, no, accommodate this. What I'm trying to say is 504 plans, you know, there are learning differences, okay? IEPs are absolutely necessary. The 504 aspect, the accommodation aspect, is a part of the IEP. It's right in there. That's why you're right. Most of the time you don't need 2 plans, but sometimes you do. The preschool, Laureen, great question. With the preschool plans also, Jenniffer, I will tell you, I have seen them. And I want to point out the use of 504 plans, temporary 504 plans for temporary types of disabilities. You break your leg, now you need we used to call them medical 504 plans, but also kids who have to I loved your examples of your own family. You are obviously a great mother bear advocate, because like you said about the accommodations given when your son couldn't get to school on time because of issues. So this is why 504 planning is really important. But I want to, now that I've bragged up, I just want to say a couple more things. I can also tell you that as a former special education director for a school district, one of the beautiful things is when standardized testing, of course, was the rage, it's still out there, but 504 helps smart, competent students with disabilities show their stuff. If you don't have accommodations, you can't show your stuff. And that was the way, both at that district and later at my son's district in Fremont County, that when they saw test scores, like, you get this if we give accommodations, yes, get those 504 plans going. And that's how is a good way of advocating, because schools love those test scores. And when they realize that giving accommodations, in even going to universal accommodations, if you will. I mean, that's why we have smartphones. That's why we have Microsoft Word. All of those things are universal accommodations from other people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, who one learning disabled, one ADHD. So they created these wonderful technologies so that everyone could benefit. So just getting teachers, I found that if they realize that it helps them be successful, principals, that it helps them be successful, that's where you break the barrier on the 504. Because otherwise, Jenniffer, as you pointed out, there's no kickback, there's no money.
No.
But it's also a wonderful way for parents, and you probably did this, I know I did this with my son, was I bought the 3-legged stool that OT recommended that he sit on. I bought the ball that OT recommended he sit on in second grade at a parochial school. And that's fine. And then guess what? More balls started happening. I bought the sit and move cushions for the preschool. And the next thing you know, the math teacher in 7th grade was, "Can I have these for every one of my students?" I said, "Sure you can." And we got them out of the PE catalog. They're cheaper there. Yeah. And put them in the room. And she just even put them on the side, and the students were picking them out. So realizing that disability is not a disgrace or a stigma. It is an ability. And they all have gifts. I don't care what the disability. Everybody has a gift. And so universal accommodations really are the way good educators grab on this stuff once they realize it works. But to get it, you got to get that 504 plan, because otherwise it's favoritism. Oh, it's unfair. Why can't they do this? You do have to reevaluate before they go off to university and college. And that's another piece to be able to get those 504s continued. It can be done. I'll do a shout out to early intervention again, because who did I go back to? I called up his former OT from preschool and say, "Can I pay you to do his reevaluations for college?" She says, bring him on. And she did the reevaluations. So did his developmental pediatrician, no charge. So I'm telling you, teachers, parents, whatever, 504 is a right, as you pointed out, Jenniffer, and it makes such a difference, because IEPs are time limited. IEPs are more intensive. But then the students, and I'm sure your children have done this, become their own self-advocates. And that's how they go through life, because they know, my son's dysgraphic still. Doesn't matter. Who cares? Every once in a while you encounter somebody who's a total jerk, but you can work around things like that even at the university level. Other than that, but really, I didn't mean to go on about me, but I saw Lorene. I wanted to give that shout out, because they made it possible.
That's so nice.
They made it possible. So early intervention, working with the schools, making sure they have what they need when they move into the schools, making sure parents know how to properly stand up, because you're right. You're lucky you were in Laramie.
Yeah.
You had Mike Massey down there in your district.
That we did.
So But no, you can get this done. So I'm sorry I've taken too much. I am so delighted. You have no idea how excited I am for your presentation. You need to take it on the road, and I still do work for Wind River Cares on Wind River Indian Reservation, and trust me, you will get an invitation.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so much.
much. I know Jen's worked so hard and she has done a fantastic job. She never ceases to amaze me with her great examples and pictures, and yeah, great presentation. She always makes things that are really hard to understand, very simple to understand. And I think that comes from that teacher background she's got. So thank you so much, Jen, and everybody who came. Jenniffer and I were planning on just taking a break right now, and you can log in. She'll probably turn off her camera and her mic, and then we'll come back in and do SMART goals. Another great presentation that she's going to have here in a minute. So if you guys want to, I'm going to turn off the recording and turn it back on when we start again. If you would like a copy of this PowerPoint sent directly to you, please put your email in the chat. Otherwise, it will be on our website, WPIC.org. And I put that in the chat as well. But if you want it, like someone wanted it like yesterday, so we'll send that directly to your email if you want. And again, thank you, Jen, so much. And we'll take a break and come back.